Devil May Cry, that one niche series with the Wacky Wahoo Pizza Man, a deadbeat father who's very motivated, and his deadweight son. What's not to love? If you've been around for long enough, and I can assume you've been around for long enough if you're watching this, you've most likely heard of the series if you haven't at least played any of the games at all. I've fallen to the den of people who have played the games, though not through all of them. At most, I've played the later 3 games, and I refuse to touch that reboot. Ugh. Like your mum refuses to touch your dad after finding out he plays League. While I haven't played the first game, it established the formula that future entries would refine, from the multiple weapon types, to unlockable moves that allow you to flesh out your combos, and the scoring system, which honestly, they made way cooler in 5, but shh! We're not here to talk about that. Yes, while Devil May Cry 1 was a very good start, I was well aware of the very rough second swing that Capcom had with Devil May Cry 2. I hadn't done anything with this one at all, whatsoever, not wanting to stain my hands with the shit that it so clearly reeks of, though, for whatever reason, I guess out of either curiosity or my ever-dwindling sanity, or at the very least, that's how it felt at the time, I decided to play the whole thing through, start to finish, see everything for myself, to see how truly bad this could possibly be. But first, a little history. Our subject today, Devil May Cry 2, was originally released in 2003 on the good old PlayStation 2, though it would receive multiple ports, as well as an eventual release through the Devil May Cry HD collection, which also contains Devil May Cry 1 and Devil May Cry 3. It is cited to have had a very troubled development cycle, which, of course, resulted in various decisions that were honestly questionable in nature that made it notably different from the first game, which, of course, led to very mixed reviews. We'll take the time to talk about that little tidbit much later, keep that in mind for now. For now, to avoid allowing it to fester for far longer than it already has been and already needs to, let's take a deep dive into the mess that is Devil May Cry 2 and explore everything that went wrong, from its plot to the gameplay itself. The plot is... there is no plot. Goodbye. Okay, sorry about that. But, jokes aside, there is a plot, but it just kind of exists, okay? So, let's get it out of the way. Our story begins in a chapel museum? It's probably a museum by the looks of it, but with how things look in this game, it's a little bit difficult to tell. Anyway, we start here, being given exposition surrounding the Age of Darkness when demons ruled the human world, and how Spada, a legendary demon, using the same sword that bore his name, drove them off by fighting alongside the humans. A story we're familiar with by this point. And I'm sorry, I don't know if it's because I'm bad with tone and stuff, maybe that is the case, but the narrator does sound like he hasn't gotten his morning caffeine boost. He's really phoning it in with this performance, I feel.
And humans were powerless under their rule.
Anyway, while this is all happening, we catch a glimpse of this girl who's approaching a glass case within this building, containing some kind of coin. What makes it significant? Does it make for a flashy piece for a magic trick? Is she a magician, looking to make her big entrance onto the scene? Well, we don't know quite yet, and before we find out anything, we're rudely interrupted by a horde of demons destroying public property. Rude. Can't have shit these days, honestly. So disrespectful. Anyway, with all seeming hopeless, Dante swoops in and saves the day, killing all of them. And before we continue, can I just say that this design really doesn't work for Dante? Am I weird for saying that? I mean, look at Devil May Cry 1 Dante. There's various elements that lend to how easily you can identify him, but aside from the hair, the main standout is his coat. The flashy red colour scheme, the length, style. It's very striking, you can tell that it's Dante. While in the later games, Dante doesn't have this fully buttoned up, or some variant of it fully buttoned up, you can still tell that it's a central part of his design. Here though, it's like he woke up one morning, tried to think of a cool new look, and then proceeded to awkwardly stitch red leather onto a black waistcoat. That combined with his hair looking too thin and almost wispy doesn't really do him any justice. But I'm getting sidetracked. You're here for my review of this train wreck, not an analysis of Dante's poor fashion sense. Maybe another idea for a video, I guess. With the matter settled, the girl just carelessly throws a knife towards Dante, bidding him adieu. Before questioning why she did that, and yes, I certainly would, I mean I wouldn't appreciate it if some girl threw a knife at me, Dante sees that with the knife she marked a particular location on the map hung on the wall nearby. This, as we learn, is the location of the One Piece. This, as we learn, is the island of Vieille de Mali, a place where the descendants of the humans who fought alongside Sparda reside. So, after taking a swan dive off of a chapel, this time I know that it is one, and doing a superhero landing, I guess.
Woo! Superhero landing!
We're thrown into the first mission. Here we learn that Dante can wall run, something that I don't think returns in the later installments of the series. I can't exactly remember, but hey, time for some hardcore parkour. Over a single wall. Yeah, this really isn't utilized that well throughout the game, and it makes me wonder why they included it at all. Moving on, after taking a small stroll to see the sights, we run into our first enemy encounter. Something small to get us used to the combat, the flow, the pace. Well, this was one thing I was at least aware of going into this game, though I really had to see for myself if it was true. This game is heavily skewed in the favor of the guns, rather than the different types of weapons that made the game's combat feel great. Swords feel so sluggish and weighty, with no real anticipation for any of the attacks, and there's a significant lack of impact to compensate for this. No sense of reward for landing combos or visual feedback to make the gameplay satisfying. Hell, in fact, when you try to connect air combos, you mostly miss them. Something the first games and the following games excel at is the visual feedback to make gameplay satisfying. But this is the start of the game, so maybe we can excuse it for things feeling so slow. Maybe it will pick up the pace later? Anyway, many other enemies later, including what I can only assume to be some kind of chimpanzee gargoyle hybrids that at the time I believe to have been barbecued and charred beyond reason. We run into the girl from before and act completely natural. Before the house that's next to them just explodes. No build up, no reason, just boom. It happens kind of often where there's just no build up or reason for things, but you'll see a bit more of that later. In the aftermath of the explosion, an old woman who the girl calls Mathieu emerges from the rubble. Surely she has to have something going on if she can make it out of there unscathed. Maybe she's a demon herself. But that's not important. What's important is that she apparently knew Sparda and her clan fought alongside him. Cool. So we at least know someone who's connected to the past, but she doesn't really say much about that either. Instead, she has a plea for Dante. Arius, the president of the Ouroboros Corporation, but we don't know that yet. We just know that there's this guy who's the president, has been using demonic power to terrorize the island and all of its inhabitants. Dante decides to pull a Two-Face and flip a coin? Some kind of heads you live, tails you die kind of thing he has going on in this game only. It's stupid. It isn't who he is, and he does this multiple times throughout the plot when deciding to help someone. Anyway, frustration aside, it lands on heads, and he agrees to help bring Arius down. Our second mission brings us to a series of underground catacombs featuring the most flawless of puzzle designs, hitting blue glowing spheres. After trudging through more mindless encounters and killing a pair of goat demons which, on the surface, looked actually kind of threatening, but we grab a jewel that grants Dante the power of flight while he's in Devil Trigger. Oh crap, I almost forgot to mention DT. Well, now that it's come up, I may as well go over some things. Much like other games in the series, Devil Trigger is a state that Dante can transform into for a brief time, which enhances his abilities. So his sword abilities, ranged attacks, and so on. However, unlike the other games in the series, at the very least as far as I'm aware of, I haven't played the remakes and refuse to touch it for now, you can find different jewels that enhance certain aspects of Devil Trigger, such as the damage element, Dante's movement speed, his healing rate, and of course, as I just mentioned, the ability to fly. And I'll give Devil May Cry 2 this at least. It experiments with Devil Trigger to a degree, however, it really doesn't go into it too deeply, and it feels like a wasted opportunity to come up with a unique spin on the gameplay while transformed. That, and it presents another problem. It makes the already mentioned problem with the combat worse. While swords receive some of the benefit for Devil Trigger, such as, you know, a different damage element, guns, on the other hand, go from this to this. Yep, you turn into a rapid-fire killing machine, effortlessly mowing down enemies by just holding down the shoot button. Anyway, moving on. Our third mission has us staring down our first boss, Oranguera, and it's at this point where I'd like to mention that this fight feels very uninspired. And not just this fight, but a lot of the other bosses feel very one-note with no changes to behavior and whatnot. Perhaps I'm too used to how dynamic some of the fights later in the series become, or perhaps I'm used to, I don't know, a better combat system, but this feels very underwhelming. Who knows? Maybe it'll pick up when we get further in. Spoiler warning, it doesn't really do that. Anyway, after collectively putting down the primate exhibit of Via de Mali and getting confused on where to go next, at the time, I said it was cryptic and bullshit, we rush under the gates of a castle after the game basically told us we couldn't cross the gap with Devil Trigger. Seems very restrictive, but look! Another boss! This time we throw down with... Is that... Yokat Gulm? Jokat Gulm? Whatever. This Ursula-esque creature with no arms but a lot of tentacles. This fight was more annoying than anything because of how small of a window you have to damage her before the tentacles regenerate, and you have to hard focus them again. I also learned the hard way that you basically have no choice, for the most part, but to use guns here, because getting in close range? Yeah, it hurts a lot when it happens, though I still try to get a few hits in here or there. It's also here that I learned of another small quirk with Devil Trigger. Whenever Dante activates the form at low health, instead of assuming his regular devil form, he transforms into a stronger version, which begins throwing powerful projectiles at any enemies within his range. However, the trade-off for this is that this form only lasts for a small amount of time, and as far as I'm aware, from what I noticed, it loses out on the health regen. I only had this happen once in the entire time I was playing, so it's not like I got to see it have much of an impact on my playthrough overall. After serving the boss up like a nice plate of calamari, we hitch a ride on a motorcycle found in the building's storage and jump a large gap, which I swear Dante could have done by himself because he can fly! Trust me, I was trying to make sense of this too, but they just choose to do it anyway because it looked cool, I guess. We're then attacked by some demon wolves, and after emerging from the tunnel, after, I guess, putting them down, but they just kind of disappear, we arrive in what I can only assume to be Detroit? Listen, I'm British. I don't know what Detroit is actually like, but I can make assumptions based on how other people describe it. Okay? Cool. Anyway, we're attacked by a new primate exhibit because somehow they managed to import more of them. And tanks? Yeah, demon-infested tanks, which are so boring to fight. My god. Anyway, after getting rid of them, we're chased by an infested helicopter through the rest of the stage. And I mean the entire rest of the stage. Until we fight it on top of a building. And once again, guns are king here because of the height that it maintains. I can feel the variety oozing through the cracks of the game's design. Another boss fight awaits us in the form of Nephasturis. Okay. Before I move on, before I continue, can I just say that the enemy names and boss names are just shit and uninspired? Like, it feels like they just either jumbled up a bunch of words and letters to make something sound intimidating and mysterious, or grabbed the first things they thought sounded cool from a demon name generator. All of them sound like this. Anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, Nephasturis. So, after a little bit of a fight, we end up lopping its head off, leading to a second phase against Nephascapatis. Do you see what I mean with the names? Do you really see what I mean? Anyway, this thing was kind of a pushover, and we see a helicopter from the Ouroboros Corporation fly off from above us. So, naturally, Dante gives chase and finds his way to an oil platform, assumedly owned by the corporation. Okay, we're getting somewhere. I think. After riding the slowest elevator and hitching a ride on Southern Rail, you'll only get this if you're British, and then another elevator, we make it to the top of the oil platform where we meet Arius face to face for the first time. You couldn't make this guy look any more like the antagonist, could you? Pale skin, pointed black hair, wears a cloak or coat of some kind of thing. He may as well be called Dracula with the vampire vibes he reeks of. Anywho, he just does the brooding thing, snaps his fingers, nopes on out of here, and leaves us to fight Furia Taurus, this huge bull demon wielding a giant hammer. At first, this fight seemed to be a bit more engaging compared to the other boss fights, but it quickly falls flat. Why, you may ask? Well, Furia Taurus's attacks involve the following: charging at the player, slamming the ground when in range, swinging his hammer around, trying to draw the player in before casting a massive AoE attack. These options are quite varied, for once, and in the right circumstances, would create a situation where the player needs to carefully run in for hits before retreating and avoiding damage, especially with the one that draws the player in. However, where this concept falls apart is thanks to our old friends. Yep, the guns are the prime suspect once again. There's nothing stopping you from distancing yourself from him and slowly whittle him down with ebony and ivory, and since there isn't really anything that he does from that far of a distance aside from try to pull you in, at the very least from what I experienced, he will repeatedly try to do this while you continue to backspace and outrange him like a coward, just like I did. There's no charging to bring the fight to you, there's only you, him, and this, which is disappointing. It could have made for an entertaining fight, but that doesn't really matter, because when the big beastie goes down, the oil rig begins to explode. Cool! And you have a time limit to get away. It isn't really that difficult, and the lengthy time limit, it just feels pointless. And there's nothing stopping you from just ignoring most of the enemies placed in your way as you sprint to find your way out. After driving away into the night, we get dragged into the depths while trying to solve a simple puzzle. Okay, normal stuff as you do, though the way that this happens reminds me of the level The Milkman Conspiracy from the first Psychonauts game. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please go check out Psychonauts, it's a good game. Anyway, we fight this giant moth butterfly thing called Nocterran. Again, this is a fairly easy fight. Just shoot at it as it hovers around above you while trying to deal with, I guess they're larvae? that try to grab you whilst you're on the ground. It was also at this point where I learned that upgrading weapons doesn't work like it does in 1 and the rest of the series. In the rest of the series, you can spend acquired red orbs on different moves that can be used in different ways during combos, allowing for robust, highly stylized combo routes that serve as an excellent means of player expression through gameplay, which is something that I always enjoy within these types of games. Naturally, you'd believe that would be present here too, right? Wrong! Unlike the rest of the series, the only thing that red orbs are spent on in relation to weapons are damage upgrades. No new moves, no new abilities, no fancy combo extensions, nothing. Just an arbitrary increase in the number to make slugging through this husk of a game less of a hassle. You may as well just upgrade the guns, because you've probably been using them the most out of the other weapons by this point in the game, but I'm getting too sidetracked. The rest of this barely their plot or waits. So, after some annoying antics in the underground tomb of the ancient king or whatever this place is, and fighting Bolverk, a skull knight commanding the demon wolves that attacked us earlier, and some metal golem thing, we once again run into the old woman Mathieu, who begs us to save Lucia after she went and had the bright idea to challenge Arius alone. And after another pointless and stupid coin flip, we agree to help. Another side note, this characterization of Dante sucks. Where's the personality, the wit, the humor? I'm aware the first game didn't have too much of that either, compared to the rest of the series, might I add. But at least he was somewhat witty, there was some personality there. This Dante just comes off as too edgy or hardcore, which really doesn't suit him whatsoever. Anyway, we corner Arius in his pompous ass office and proceed to throw down with him. This fight is boring and kind of annoying. Arius himself mostly darts around the office, attacking from a distance and periodically shielding himself from damage, which, you know, I guess could try and provide some kind of strategy. The frustration mainly comes from him throwing minions into the mix. These start off as small enemies, but slowly progress into larger ones as you bring his health down. There's this attempt to make it an interesting challenge, but really having to juggle between him and the other enemies around you comes off as frustrating and more artificial than an actual genuine challenge. Anyway, after beating him, Dante saves Lucia. However, despite this, the asshole knocks them out of his office anyway and proceeds to begin the ritual, which, in turn, starts to fuse the human world and the demon world together. Lucia laments that she was created by him. However, she quickly tells Dante that they have until the sun and the moon fully eclipses to stop Arius and the ritual. Okay, cool. So naturally, we start exploring the messed up version of my reality. I mean, a demented version of the town from earlier, searching for orbs to open up the way to the demon world. As you do. Well, as we try to leave once we've opened the way, we're suddenly confronted by Phantom? From Devil May Cry 1? Didn't you die? Somehow, Phantom has returned. Well, it didn't amount to much in the end, as they go down very easily, opening the way to the demon world. After going back and forth between the funny corridors of hell and making our way back up to Arius, we throw down with Bolverk and his wolves one last time. Well, we make kind of quick work with them, and after a fun elevator ride reminiscent of that one scene from Captain America the Winter Soldier, we fight yet another boss, Magia, or Trismagia, or whatever, who Dante just tells to die. No funny one-liner or quip, just die. That is all. Also, yet another boss after just defeating one. You can really feel the attempts to make things feel challenging by throwing them together one after another like a gauntlet. Anyway, Trismagia splits into 3 different heads to fire 3 different projectiles, periodically fusing back together to deal massive damage. This one wasn't so challenging as it was tedious and repetitive, though it did bring my health low, so there's that. After that, we finally reach Arius's office once more, with the Count beginning to perform the ritual to summon a demon, absorb their power, and become, as he puts it,
An all-powerful immortal!
I didn't expect this to be what he sounded like. I couldn't have been the only one who pictured someone with a design like this to sound deep, foreboding, and menacing, not like some kind of clown. Anyway, the Vampire Lord notices that the ritual isn't proceeding like he wished, which is when Dante strolls on in, just casually, and reveals that he swapped the coin arcana for a regular coin. When did he do this? Much like the explosion from very early on in the game, this wasn't hinted to or built up to at all, and yet suddenly it's revealed that the coin was swapped so the ritual couldn't work to begin with, once again proving that there was no real thought put into the plot and its events. Anyway, we face off against Arius once again, where his fight plays out mostly the same as the previous one, which is very uninspired. Imagine being considered a primary antagonist and not having a worthwhile fight for your last appearance. Sorry for the spoilers, by the way, but I may as well just throw it out there. Anyway, I say mostly the same because Arius now has 2 minions that will constantly try to evade your attacks when you target them and attempt to disrupt you when you go for him. I died once during this fight, but only because they ganged up on me and trapped me in a corner. They weren't really fun to deal with at all, and only served as an irritation and form of artificial difficulty compared to actually making Arius himself the challenge. Anyway, it doesn't matter too much because not long after defeating him, Dante just shoots him dead and sends him crashing through the wall. Crashing through the wall? Now, there's a lot of wild things that happen later in the series that I can forgive it for, but the impact shouldn't have been enough to shatter through the wall. I don't know why I'm trying to rationalize Devil May Cry 2 of all things, when there is no rhyme, reason, or anything to a lot of the experience. With things with Arius settled, Dante returns to Lucia for her to say that Dante must now finish her off, as she is Arius' creation and will likely become just like him. Well, I know that Arius himself is evil, but surely you can decide things for yourself, no? Their imminent clash is immediately interrupted by the portal to the demon world opening, despite the ritual supposedly failing because of the normal coin being thrown in with the rest of the... Never mind. Dante does this stupid coin flip for the last time, and surprise, he leaps into the portal because it landed on heads. Good riddance to this stupid thing. I'm so glad it doesn't return as a thing he does in the later games. Inside the Demon World portal, Dante finds Argosax the Chaos, the target of Arius' ritual and an amalgam of most of the other bosses in the game. I say most because not all of them are included. Dante must work to eliminate each segment of this boss one by one until he finally goes down. This fight wasn't difficult, rather it was again more annoying than anything. Though it was definitely counteracted by one of the other upgrades for Devil Trigger, which amplifies the rate at which Dante is able to heal while in the form. Yep, another case of abusing the game's lack of balance. Anyway, Argosax dies as quickly as they were properly introduced to the story, and out emerges a lava angel thing called the Despair Embodied. Again, nothing about this was alluded to at all. This thing comes out of nowhere, steals the show, and somehow gives a fight more challenging than anything else in the whole game. This fight actually made me want to concentrate, and somewhat pushed my understanding of the game and the combat, although there really wasn't much of the combat to begin with. A lot of the attacks they use are quick and close quarters, meaning you need to get attacks in when possible, but also be careful of when they attack. Although I did spend a part of the fight outranging them with the guns, I did, at the very least, try and play the game. Dante, after winning, surprises the thing out of nowhere, shooting it in the face with a supercharged shot, which he doesn't do anywhere else in the game? But yeah, the entity is defeated. With the day saved, Dante whips out his motorcycle from out of nowhere, might I add, and rides into the depths of hell. The plot just happens, and then ends with Dante disappearing. Well, that was certainly something, wasn't it? While the game's story had what I guess you could call ideas, none of them were really introduced or explained very well. Questions were made and not really answered, and we never got to hear what Matteo wanted to tell Dante, because he just disappears at the end. And with regards to the gameplay, well, if it wasn't already evident through my various tangents and tirades, I really didn't enjoy myself with the general gameplay loop. The lack of emphasis on combos, which is what made the first game and makes the other games great. The over-reliance on guns, which made things very one-note and monotonous. Lackluster upgrade system, which really just feels useless. Uninspiring enemies with ridiculous names, and equally uninspiring boss encounters that were oftentimes placed right next to one another in the same mission to seemingly create the illusion of challenge. At least that's how it felt to me. Or had extra enemies to create artificial difficulty. There are a lot of factors working against this game. And this is all on Dante's side of the story. I completely refused to play Lucia's story out of consideration for how much my sanity had already dwindled on this train ride of a cliff. Now you may be wondering, Tails, it's all well and good to rag on this game for the unholy abomination that it so clearly is, but didn't you say there was a troubled development cycle and decisions that led to this? What's going on with that? Well, thank you for reminding me. Let's talk about that. Even all these years later, allegedly there's a lot surrounding the development cycle that remains a mystery. However, from some information that I've found while doing some research on Reddit, Wikipedia, and a bunch of other sources, the following are my findings. Now, take what I'm saying with a pinch of salt because it may not necessarily be the whole truth. Like I said, a lot is not known about what happened behind the scenes, and what I have found may be somewhat unfounded. So, remember Devil May Cry 1? Wait. This will make sense soon. Just hear me out. Well, towards the end of the development of the first game, Capcom could already see the potential success of the franchise, and rightly so. I mean, have you seen what the series became in the end? Anyway, because of this potential, they took a big risk on the series' early success, and greenlit a sequel before the game started shipping. Well, this would have been fine and all, except for one itty-bitty problem. Hideki Kamiya and his team, Team Little Devils, were not fully aware of any of this happening. They weren't aware of a sequel being greenlit or development on it starting or anything. So, therefore, they had no involvement in the planning or development of the sequel whatsoever. Instead, Devil May Cry 2 was allegedly handed over to Capcom's arcade division. This specific division was, of course, mostly assigned to work on arcade games, hence the name. However, the developers within this division had no experience with a game of this breed. In addition, the project was supposedly headed by a novice director at first, who was unproven with no real experience. Due to this, the team made some wild assumptions about things such as the gameplay, portrayal of characters, and so on. To summarize, first, Dante's overall personality in this game. Some say the team looked at his portrayal in 1 and didn't like how playful and wisecracking he was, while others say that they based his personality and mannerisms on his presentation within the game's promotional material, and, as a result, made him brooding and serious. This doesn't really encompass his awful character design for this game, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that was part of it. Second, the gameplay as a whole and the reliance on guns. Rather than building off of what was made in the first game, this team's preferences leaned more towards making guns the primary focus of the gameplay, rather than combos and melee combat, which is one reason why you are able to whip out the pistols and mow down most things without ever needing to swing a sword, and the complete lack of combo variety. Yes, I did say this is one of the reasons. There is another one for this. After several months of development, however, it was becoming clear to Capcom that development of the sequel was experiencing problems, and it was becoming increasingly more obvious. So, as a result, Hideaki Itsuno, who would eventually be responsible for directing the rest of the games in the series so far, and be a big part of how the future of them was shaped, was brought on as a replacement for the director in order to salvage what had been made so far for the game and, allegedly, be used as a scapegoat to take the blame for the team's failings. As I said, a lot of what happened is still surrounded in mystery, though apparently some rumor that the novice director is important and Itsuno was used as a scapegoat in order to protect their career persists. However, this is only speculation on the parts of the people on the internet, so again, grain of salt. Anyway, with 4 months remaining for the game's development, there was simply not enough time for Itsuno to bring his full vision to the project. There wasn't much present to begin with, honestly, and apparently Dante's Stinger, the forward thrust present in his moveset in all iterations of the character, was the only thing they had right, according to the team when he asked what they'd managed to develop so far. However, despite all of this, he managed to take the broken, tattered scrapes of the game's tapestry and weave them together to make a somewhat playable experience. However, somewhat playable wasn't enough for the game to be deemed good by consumers, and as a result, it received mixed reviews and served as a stain on Itsuno's career. Hideaki Itsuno would then take the lessons he learned from this project with him when directing the third game in the series, which is still praised by many as one of the best games in the series, alongside Devil May Cry 5, which, yeah, it kicks ass. Both of them do. So, after this brief yet frighteningly eventful journey with the game, is it really as bad as I had heard? Did it live up to the infamy that it still maintains among fans of the series? Yes, it definitely does, and in some cases, it is much worse. The supposed development cycle for this game resulted in many decisions that resulted in an underwhelming, unimportant story with one-note characters, especially in the case of Arius, which ends without any real significant impact. I mean, come on, Dante just rides off and that's it. Game end. As well as this, the choice to focus on gunplay rather than the format that the series is known for resulted in a boring, tedious and monotonous experience which lacks the flavour and variety of even its own predecessor, and feels like a shoot-to-win game more than anything else. It just felt so unfun to play. However, despite these shortcomings obviously creating such a disappointment, this game definitely served as an important lesson to those who worked on it, with these mistakes being redeemed as the series went on. It is stated, apparently, that DMC5 is the closest thing to the vision that Hideaki Itsuno had when he started working on the series. But yeah, game very bad. I would not recommend playing it unless you're also at risk of losing your sanity like I was. Hey everyone! If you're here right at the end, I'd like to personally thank you all for watching this the whole way through. Despite what terrible, irreparable damage this game may or may not have done to my psyche, I enjoyed working on it. I sure hope I don't have an experience like that again. In the meantime, if you want to see more stuff like this from me, please hit the like and subscribe button to keep up with stuff on the channel. I also stream live on Twitch every Monday, Wednesday, Friday and Sunday. You can find the link to that in the description, along with both my Twitter and my Blue Sky. Catch you all next time!